If ADHD explains your attention, but not your sensory overload, something may still feel unfinished. If autism explains your shutdowns, but not your craving for novelty, the picture may still feel incomplete. And if you can look organized in public, then lose the ability to speak, cook, answer messages, or make one simple decision when you get home, you may be standing in the overlap that confuses many adults: ADHD, autism, and AuDHD. This confusion is not rare. Many adults spend years collecting partial explanations. One label explains the procrastination, but not the social exhaustion. Another explains the sensory pain, but not the impulsive spending or the unfinished projects. A third person says, "You cannot be autistic, because you make eye contact." Someone else says, "You cannot have ADHD, because you can focus for hours." And inside, you may be thinking, both of those statements miss something important. So in this video, we are going to slow the whole question down. This is not a diagnostic test. It cannot tell you whether you have ADHD, autism, both, or neither. A proper assessment looks at developmental history, current functioning, impairment, strengths, context, mental health, sleep, trauma, learning differences, medical factors, and much more. But a video can give you a practical map. And a map can help you ask better questions, notice better patterns, and prepare for better support. The goal is not to force yourself into a label. The goal is to understand what is actually driving the difficulty. If this kind of calm, practical neurodivergent support is useful to you, subscribe to the Autism Support Guide. We focus on autism, ADHD, AuDHD, sensory overload, masking, burnout, accommodations, and everyday support without panic or miracle claims. Now let's build the map. Start with 3 columns. In one column, ADHD is often connected with attention regulation, impulse control, time awareness, working memory, reward, motivation, emotional intensity, and executive function. In the second column, autism is often connected with social communication differences, sensory processing, routines, predictability, focused interests, transitions, masking, and differences in how the world is processed. In the third column, AuDHD means both sets of patterns may be present in the same person. Not perfectly. Not stereotypically. Not in the same way every day. But enough that one explanation alone may not describe the lived experience. The reason adults get confused is that these columns overlap in real life. Difficulty starting tasks can appear in ADHD and autism. Social exhaustion can appear in ADHD and autism. Sensory issues can appear in ADHD and autism. Emotional overwhelm can appear in ADHD and autism. Burnout can happen in both, especially when a person has spent years compensating. But the outward behavior is only the surface. The support plan depends on the driver underneath. Imagine an adult who does not answer texts for 3 days. From the outside, that looks like avoidance. It could be ADHD working memory. The message disappeared from awareness as soon as the notification was gone. It could be autistic social load. The person read it, knew it required the right tone, and froze because the response felt ambiguous. It could be burnout. Even a friendly message feels like one more demand. It could be anxiety. It could be depression. It could be several of these at once. That is why the better question is not, which label owns this behavior? The better question is, what makes this behavior happen, and what support reduces the cost? Pattern 1, Attention and Focus. Many adults are told, you cannot have ADHD because you can focus. That is a misunderstanding. ADHD is not simply an absence of attention. It is often difficulty regulating attention. Attention may lock onto what is interesting, urgent, novel, emotionally charged, or immediately rewarding, while ordinary tasks feel almost impossible to start. Autism can also involve intense focus. Some autistic people describe deep, narrow attention toward an interest, a pattern, a system, a problem, or a preferred activity. Shifting away can feel physically difficult, not because the person is being stubborn, but because the brain is deeply anchored. So both ADHD and autism can involve intense focus. The difference may be in the pattern. ADHD focus may chase stimulation. The person jumps between tabs, ideas, hobbies, conversations, plans, and urgent tasks. They may start 5 projects, feel real excitement, and then struggle to finish when novelty fades. Time may disappear. Priorities may blur. A boring task may feel painful, even when it matters. Autistic focus may be more tied to depth, sameness, interest, detail, or completion. The person may want to stay with one subject long enough to fully process it. Interruptions may feel jarring. Switching tasks may create distress because the mental system was not finished yet. In AuDHD, both can exist. You may crave novelty and also need predictability. You may collect new interests quickly, then dive into one of them with autistic depth. You may need stimulation to begin, then need silence to continue. You may want to switch tasks and also feel distressed when someone else forces the switch. The practical question is, what kind of attention support is needed here? If the driver is ADHD-style understimulation, the support may be body doubling, timers, novelty, movement, urgency, rewards, shorter work blocks, or turning the task into something more engaging. If the driver is autistic transition cost, the support may be warnings before switching, written steps, less interruption, clear stopping points, and time to close the mental loop. If both are present, the best support may be predictable variety, a clear routine with choice inside it. Pattern 2, sensory load and stimulation. Sensory differences are one of the biggest reasons adults miss the full picture. They may think, I have attention problems, but they do not notice that their attention collapses mostly in bright rooms, noisy restaurants, open offices, crowded stores, scratchy clothing, strong smells, or chaotic homes. Many people with ADHD have sensory sensitivities or sensory seeking. A person may need music, movement, fidgeting, pressure, or background stimulation to stay alert. They may become restless in silence or bored in low-stimulation environments. Autistic sensory processing can be central to access. Lights may hurt. Sounds may stack. Touch may feel intrusive. Food textures may be overwhelming. A normal workday may become exhausting because the sensory environment is constantly demanding effort. The overlap can be confusing because an ADHD adult may both seek and avoid sensory input. They may need music to start cleaning, then suddenly the music becomes too much. They may love busy events in theory, then crash for 2 days afterward. They may seek movement, pressure, novelty, and sound, but still become overloaded by crowds, fluorescent lights, or overlapping voices. This is not contradiction. It is regulation. The body may be trying to reach the right level of input, but the window may be narrow. Too little input feels unbearable. Too much input also feels unbearable. The person is not being dramatic when they say, I need sound, and then later, please turn it off. Their nervous system may have crossed a threshold. A useful sensory question is, does this environment change the person's ability to think, speak, decide, listen, or recover? If the answer is yes, sensory support is not a luxury. It is access. For daily life, that might mean noise-reducing headphones, softer lighting, predictable seating, clothing changes, reduced clutter, movement breaks, sunglasses, quiet recovery time, or choosing errands at less crowded times. At work, it might mean a quieter workspace, written instructions, fewer unnecessary meetings, camera-off options, or permission to use regulation tools. The key is to stop treating sensory needs as personality quirks. Sensory load can be the hidden tax that makes everything else harder. Pattern 3, social confusion and masking. Adults often ask, if I can socialize, does that mean I cannot be autistic? No. The question is not only whether you can socialize. It is what socializing costs, how you do it, how much of it is conscious, and what recovery looks like afterward. ADHD can affect social life through interrupting, talking quickly, losing track of details, forgetting to reply, emotional intensity, rejection sensitivity, or following an interesting tangent before realizing the other person is lost. Autism can affect social life through differences in reading implied rules, interpreting tone, managing eye contact, understanding indirect communication, handling small talk, tracking multiple people, processing facial expressions, or tolerating the sensory load of social spaces. From the outside, both may look like being awkward, intense, quiet, distracted, rude, too direct, too much, or distant. Those labels are not useful. The driver matters. An ADHD adult may understand a social rule but struggle to pause before speaking. They may care deeply, but their working memory drops the follow-up. They may interrupt because the thought feels like it will disappear. An autistic adult may be carefully calculating the rule in real time. They may be translating facial expressions, tone, timing, words, body language, and expected responses while also managing lights, noise, and eye contact. They may look calm while working extremely hard. A high-masking adult may appear socially capable because they have built scripts. They know how to smile, nod, ask questions, copy tone, hide confusion, and push through discomfort. But after the interaction, they may replay every sentence, collapse from exhaustion, or avoid people for days. AuDHD can add another layer. The ADHD side may want spontaneity, connection, humor, speed, and novelty. The autistic side may need predictability, clarity, recovery, and less ambiguity. The person may overshare impulsively, then spend hours analyzing whether they violated an invisible rule. A practical social checklist is this. Did the difficulty come from impulse timing, hidden rules, sensory load, ambiguity, rejection sensitivity, masking, or recovery debt? Each answer points to a different support. Impulse timing may need pause scripts. Hidden rules may need explicit communication. Sensory load may need quieter settings. Rejection sensitivity may need reassurance and repair. Masking may need safer relationships where less performance is required. Pattern 4, Routines, Novelty, and Transitions. This is one of the places where AuDHD can feel especially confusing. Autism is often associated with predictability, routines, sameness, and distress when plans change suddenly. ADHD is often associated with novelty-seeking, boredom sensitivity, restlessness, and difficulty sustaining routines. So an AuDHD adult may genuinely need a routine and genuinely rebel against that routine once it becomes too repetitive. They may plan a perfect system on Sunday, feel trapped by it on Tuesday, abandon it on Wednesday, and then feel anxious because life has become unstructured again. That does not mean they are lazy or unserious. It may mean the support design is incomplete. A rigid routine may soothe autistic uncertainty but starve ADHD stimulation. A completely spontaneous life may feed ADHD novelty but overload autistic predictability. The middle path is often predictable variety. Predictable variety means the frame stays stable, but the details have options. For example, the morning routine has the same order, but breakfast has 3 acceptable choices. The workday has 2 deep work blocks, but the person can choose which task comes first. The cleaning routine always starts with trash, dishes, and laundry, but music, timers, or body doubling can change. The weekly meal plan has repeated categories, not identical meals. Transitions also deserve attention. ADHD may struggle to start because the task is boring or unclear. Autism may struggle to switch because the current mental state has not been closed. AuDHD may struggle with both starting and stopping. A transition support might be a 10-minute warning, a written next step, a closing ritual, a visual timer, a movement break, or a small bridge between activities. The important point is that support should fit the nervous system you actually have, not the productivity system someone sold online. Pattern 5. Emotional regulation, rejection, meltdown, shutdown, and burnout. Both ADHD and autism can involve emotional intensity. But again, the driver matters. In ADHD, emotions may rise quickly. Frustration, excitement, shame, anger, or rejection can feel immediate and consuming. Some people describe rejection sensitivity. A small sign of disapproval can feel painful, even if part of the person knows it may not be as serious as it feels. In autism, emotional escalation may be tied to overload, unexpected change, sensory pain, communication breakdown, injustice, confusion, or accumulated masking. A meltdown is not a tantrum. It is a loss of regulation under overwhelming load. A shutdown may look quiet from the outside, but inside the person may be unable to speak, decide, move easily, or process more demands. Burnout can happen when a person spends too long functioning beyond capacity. For autistic adults, autistic burnout is often described as deep exhaustion, reduced tolerance, loss of skills, increased sensory sensitivity, and difficulty doing things that used to be possible. ADHD burnout can also come from chronic overextension, urgency cycles, executive strain, shame, and inconsistent support. AuDHD burnout may be hard to identify because the person may keep chasing stimulation while also needing deep recovery. They may look inconsistent, productive one day, unable to function the next. Social one week, unreachable the next. Excited about a new plan, then completely depleted. The support question is not, why are you overreacting? The support question is, what load built up before this moment? Look for early warning signs: getting louder, going silent, becoming rigid, becoming silly, losing words, pacing, snapping, repeating questions, avoiding eye contact, feeling unreal, needing pressure, scrolling compulsively, or suddenly needing to leave. Once overload is high, lectures rarely help. More words can become more demand. Better support may be fewer words, lower sensory input, clear choices, safety, hydration, quiet, pressure if welcomed, and a later conversation when the nervous system has settled. Pattern 6. Executive dysfunction and adult life. Adult life is full of invisible executive demands. Paying bills, answering emails, cleaning, cooking, scheduling appointments, maintaining relationships, tracking deadlines, switching tasks, planning transportation, remembering forms, and making decisions all require executive function. ADHD can affect working memory, initiation, inhibition, prioritizing, time awareness, follow-through, and task completion. Autism can affect executive function when the task is ambiguous, the environment is overwhelming, the transition is abrupt, or the expectation is not clearly defined. This is why, just do it, is usually bad advice. A person may not be refusing. They may not be able to locate the first step. Or they may see every step at once and freeze. Or they may know the steps, but the sensory environment makes thinking impossible. Or they may start, then get pulled into a related task. Or the task may require a phone call, and the uncertainty of that social interaction blocks the whole chain. For ADHD adults, the stuck point can shift. One day the problem is boredom. Another day it is ambiguity. Another day it is transition cost. Another day it is sensory overload. Another day it is shame from failing the same task again. A better executive function question is, which part of the task is failing? Starting, sequencing, remembering, prioritizing, switching, tolerating uncertainty, communicating, finishing, or recovering. Then build external support around that specific point. Use checklists, calendars, alarms, automatic payments, visual examples, body doubling, written instructions, templates, smaller task chunks, quiet spaces, clear deadlines, and permission to reduce unnecessary steps. External structure is not cheating. It is accessibility. Now let's talk about the biggest mistake, trying to solve the overlap by arguing with yourself. Many adults say, maybe I am just lazy. But laziness usually means a person could act and simply does not care. Most questioning adults do care. They care so much that they are exhausted, ashamed, researching at midnight, and trying to understand why ordinary life feels so expensive. Others say, maybe I am making excuses. But support is not the same as excuse-making. An excuse avoids responsibility. A support helps someone meet responsibility with less damage. And some people say, I need to know the exact label before I change anything. A diagnosis can be very helpful, especially for accommodations, medication decisions, therapy planning, school or workplace documentation, and self-understanding. But you can begin observing patterns and testing supports before every question is settled. You can notice that noise drains you. You can use headphones. You can notice that verbal instructions vanish. You can ask for written ones. You can notice that open-ended tasks freeze you. You can request examples. You can notice that social events require recovery time. You can plan less demanding days afterward. Support can begin with honest observation. If you are preparing for an assessment, bring patterns, not just labels. Write down examples from childhood and adulthood. Note attention, sensory processing, routines, social communication, masking, emotional regulation, executive function, school history, work history, relationships, strengths, and what helps. Include what people do not see from the outside. For example, I can perform well in meetings, but I cannot speak for an hour afterward. Or, I finish urgent projects, but routine maintenance collapses. Or, I want friends, but group settings overload me. Or, I need novelty to start tasks, but sudden changes make me panic. These details are more useful than a single online checklist score. Also remember that other factors can mimic or intensify these patterns. Anxiety, trauma, depression, sleep problems, substance use, hormonal changes, chronic illness, learning differences, giftedness, and stress can all affect attention, emotion, sensory tolerance, and social behavior. That does not invalidate your experience. It simply means careful evaluation matters. So here is the practical framework. When a confusing pattern appears, ask 7 questions. First, what happened on the outside? Second, what was happening on the inside? Third, what happened before it? Fourth, what changed in the environment? Fifth, what did the person need but not have? Sixth, what helped recovery? Seventh, would a support reduce the mismatch next time? That framework works whether the final answer is ADHD, autism, AuDHD, something else, or a combination. Because the point is not to win an identity argument. The point is to reduce suffering and increase access. If you recognize yourself in this overlap, you are not broken for being complicated. Human nervous systems are not tidy charts. You may need stimulation and quiet. You may need routine and choice. You may want connection and recovery. You may be capable and disabled by context. You may look fine and be spending enormous effort to appear that way. That complexity deserves curiosity, not shame. Before we close, here are mistakes to avoid. Do not diagnose yourself from one video. Use this as a starting map, not a final verdict. Do not dismiss autism because you can make eye contact, have a job, or learn social scripts. Do not dismiss ADHD because you can focus intensely on things that interest you. Do not dismiss AuDHD because your needs seem contradictory. Do not treat sensory supports, written instructions, routines, or recovery time as weakness. And do not chase anyone promising a cure. Autism and ADHD support should protect dignity, autonomy, communication, access, and quality of life. If this video helped you put words to the overlap, subscribe for more calm explainers from the Autism Support Guide. In the comments, tell us which overlap is most confusing for you: attention, sensory overload, social masking, routines, emotional regulation, or burnout. Your comments help shape future videos. If you want to support the channel more directly, you can use the membership and support options linked below. That support helps us keep making careful, non-sensational resources. And for the next step, watch our videos on high-masking autistic burnout, workplace accommodations, and ADHD versus autism support checklists. Those topics build directly on this map. Final summary. ADHD and autism can overlap on attention, sensory needs, social life, routines, emotions, and executive function. The same outward behavior can have different internal drivers. AuDHD can feel contradictory because the person may need both stimulation and predictability, both connection and recovery, both movement and quiet. The most useful question is not, which label owns this trait? The more useful question is, what is the pattern, what is the driver, and what support would reduce the cost? Start there. Track honestly. Seek qualified help when you need it. And build support around the person in front of you, not the stereotype someone else expected.